Hello, and welcome. And or welcome, yes. Typho Shisho. It's time to primarily give you a breakdown of my current build. I was in the middle of a tier 77 dungeon or something, and my network died a little bit. Yes. Okay. So I want to show you what's up with my build here, okay? Really quick now. I'm a barbarian, level 100. That's how high it goes. Ain't that special. So it's best if I demonstrate first and then give you a breakdown. Otherwise, you won't really see it in context. Let's just go up the front door for a second, and I'll show you what's going on. And then I'll explain things in time, okay? Really quick. Really quick. In case you don't know, you can, like, do this dismount attack. It's so cool. Wow. So, I fishy dash around. I have to do a bunch of basic attacks on these guys, okay? I do a bunch of basic attacks, teleporting around from enemy to enemy, like this. Okay? I could close the gap, I'll show you. I can do that, you see? I can do that. I can do that, alright? Alright? It helps me close the gap, otherwise I'm just running around too much. That is the lunging strike. It also makes the enemies bleed over time. It puts the bleeding status on them. And it has a chance to make me berserk. Or not. Whatever. Anyways, I dash around with lunging strike. Okay? Now my core ability, number one, is the whirlwind. The whirlwind. So, let's just dash around. Whirlwind, dash around, whirlwind. Okay? Nice and basic. Alright? You see, as I use my lunging strike, I'm generating fury. And I spend the fury. Obviously. Very basic. But then I have this. Okay? And then I have this. Okay? That helps me get around even more. Now the whirlwind, I can kind of move through the enemies while attacking. I can move while attacking, which is very useful during boss fights. I can spin around the back of the boss while still attacking. The leap can jump off of things. The dash moves forward. We also all have an evade with the spacebar on PC. It has a cooldown though. Now, the cooldown for my evade is reduced as I kill enemies. See? See, I can kind of dash back and forth. That was me using evade and attacking with my primary basic attack. See, I'm evading through the enemy while I'm attacking with spacebar. As I attack, it reduces the cooldown. See, I'm both using my lunging strike and I'm dashing. There's a reason why I'm doing that. It's very important, as I will show you eventually. Okay? Now I have this upheaval ability. It does this. Okay? It's also a core ability. It does a bunch of damage. And even more than what you even see. But it costs fury. And I'm also spending fury with my whirlwind. So the goal is to build up a bunch of fury. And then spend it through this big attack here. But I don't do it all the time. I do it on key occasions. Based upon my abilities. Now I'll show you what's up. Let me go into a lower level dungeon for a second. Just really quick. It'll be filled with bad guys just so I can show you what's up. I just want some dense enemies so I can show you what my build does. Okay? I just want to show you what's up with my build here. And then I'll show you my items and I'll show you my skills. My Paragon board. All that. So first, let's just run through here and you'll see what happens. So I use my Wrath of the Berserker. That makes me all monstrous for a time period. Okay. See, we dash around, dash around, dash around. I cover ground by jumping. You know, we push, push, push. Push forward, twirl, twirl, twirl. get my Wrath of the Berserker back up and twirl back through the enemies. I teleport through them, twirl through them, and every so often I'm building up this big attack. But I'm not using it yet. I'm not using that other ability until right about now. You see? I'm very selective. Ideally, I want to do that whenever I'm in that monstrous form in Wrath of the Berserker. You can see, I'll do it again in just a bit. In 5 seconds. I'll show you something. So right here we have this ability called Wrath of the Berserker, where I explode into rage, calling upon the power of the ancients to make me all flim-flam. Like that. Boom. You see, I'm all fiery and cool. So during that time period, I do more damage. Berserker mode, and so forth. See, boom. Now, the reason why it's important is because I can lower the cooldown of that ability by evading through enemies. And I'm showing you that I'm trying to lunge to the enemy and then dash through them, which then reduces my cooldown right here. I'll show you what's up. These boots here called Flicker Step. Every enemy that I evade through reduces my active ultimate cooldown by 4 seconds. Amazing. Or up to 10 seconds. So I can jump through a group of enemies, and it'll just shoot down my cooldown here, which is ideal. All right. So that's what I'm trying to do a little bit. Trying to keep that Wrath of the Berserker active as much as possible by dishing and dashing around, and that's why I am attacking in the direction of the enemy. Just to get this back up and running. Every time that I do that, I explode into a ball of fire. So, what I'm doing. Now, I have this other mega ability that I showed you with that big hammer. That upheaval situation. I'm waiting until I have certain buffs ready. And I get those buffs ready by spending a bunch of fury. You can see right here, my next upheaval is guaranteed to critically strike and has a 30% critical strike damage. Amazing. And this other buff, after spending 300 of my primary resource, my next core skill, besides Whirlwind, will be a guaranteed overpower. That's from these two items over here. The Ring of Red Furor, the Barbarian's Malignant Ring that just came out recently. Amazing. Paired with the Banished Lord's Talisman, this amulet that increases the effect of my overpower, plus some other cool abilities. And that makes it where ever so often I can unleash a ton of damage after spending a bunch of fury. You'll see? Along the way, I'm trying to go real fast by getting this online, you know. It's really powerful. Exploding to rage, knocking back surrounding enemies, and gaining berserking and unstoppable for 5 seconds. For the next 10 seconds, dealing direct damage with basic skills grants berserking. And while it's active, it's amazing. Increased movement speed, fury generation, and increases the damage bonus per every 50 fury that I spend while it's active. So I want this thing active. I want to dump a bunch of money or a bunch of fury to increase that damage bonus and just maintain it the whole time by using my lunging strike and evading in the direction of the enemy after reducing the cooldown of my evade by killing enemies. Okay? To increase the effectiveness of this upheaval ability, I'm using Leap just to move around faster. That's all it does for me right now. It is a brawling ability, and brawling abilities are able to increase my berserk for a bit longer, but I have that through other means. I'm just using it to move around right now. The charge is also to move around, on top of being really fast, you know, and I have methods to go faster, but it's really about pushing the enemies, knockback, crowd control, and it counts as unstoppable. It's very powerful. Now, if you look at my gear here, I have lots of cool stuff going on. I showed you my amulet that gives me that overpower. I showed you that ring that gives me the critical. And we're going, and the boots, the flicker step, that reduces my ultimate cooldown. Now, overpower, in case you don't know, gives you additional damage based upon your core damage plus your life and your fortify. So if you have tons of life and fortify, you do more damage. My character has a bunch of life, so it's working out, you see. It's very important. And I mentioned that I'm getting Berserk online through a variety of means. Here's my skill tree, really quick. So I have the option, which I do have right now, which is good. Every time I hit enemies with my leap and my berserk, and my charge, I get berserk just for a second. But I'm also getting berserk from Wrath of the Berserker and from my basic attack, I believe. See, I've chosen, yes, and my basic attack, I'm using that. So I have berserk from a variety of means, okay? And berserk increases my movement speed and my attack damage. And I think my attack speed maybe as well. But there's other buffs and so forth amongst the Paragon tree that I'll show you just for a second. You see? To increase damage while berserking. I have to dig towards specifically, and you only have so many points to dig towards these amazing abilities. For example, 20% damage while berserking, increased berserking duration, more and more and more damage right there. Over here, damage reduction from close enemies, and so forth, and so on. But I'll show you and over here as well. I'll show you this in just a bit, okay? But the point is, I have berserking from a variety of sources, and means to make it more powerful. Now this helmet, the Tusk Helm of Joritz the Mighty, gives me an extra benefit while I'm berserk. So if I'm berserk and then I get berserk again, I have a strong chance to become enraged, dealing 15% more damage, and gaining 2 fury per second, and gaining cooldown reduction. That's why I'm trying to get that berserk online and stacked up with itself a little bit. It's awesome. This helmet also has attack speed, damage while berserking, max fury, and some other passive. Now, my whirlwind deals fire damage because of this glove, Gore's devastating grips. Whirlwind explodes every 2 seconds, and after it ends, it deals a bunch of the base damage as fire damage. This is a unique item. So I'll show you what it does right now. Just as I go, there's fire coming around me. Also, this sword here, while berserking, I deal fire damage to surrounding enemies. Okay, and there's damage while berserking, injured enemies, close enemies, and so forth. So, let's just get some fury for a second. So as you see, I'm on fire. There's little fire explosions. Very nice. See, fire is coming out of my body. There's fire, fire, fire. There's fire, fire, fire. Right? Fire, fire. See, I'm on fire. Wonderful. Alright. That works well with these. See, so I just did that hammer effect with that fire on the ground. So my hammer here, the Hell Hammer, is another unique item. Upheaval ignites the ground, burning enemies for additional amounts of damage over 4 seconds. But it also gives me damage reduction from burning enemies. Damage to burning enemies. Wonderful. And overpower damage and so forth and so on. So damage to burning enemies, 102%, and damage reduction from burning enemies. So that attack in itself puts them on fire, but so do several of my other abilities. So that works out synergistically. You saw my charge here with these ancients coming with me. That's this other legendary item aspect. While berserking, I deal... charge calls forth 4 ancients who also charge, dealing some damage. Whatever. Okay? And that leaves me with my chest and my legs, which give me this amazing barrier effect. Now, my barrier isn't supposed to heal me directly with my chest. They're both barrier items. So my chest and legs. My chest is Soul Brand. I just got this recently, relatively, from Duriel or something. And it's an amazing thing. So increase lucky hit chance while I have a barrier. Okay. Increase barrier generation from life and damage reduction from close enemies. But my healing potion no longer heals me instantly. Instead, it grants a barrier for 200% of the healing for 4 seconds. While I have a barrier, I have 20% damage reduction. Cool. So my potion gives me a barrier. You see? I'm going to use a couple, and it gets my barrier up to like 8,000 or 9,000. Very nice. And then it starts to go away eventually. Eventually. And now it's gone. See? It lasts for a certain amount of time. You know what I mean? But that's just an extra barrier. Now this other barrier comes in all the time. Increased potion drop rate. While injured, my potion grants me movement speed. Increased healing received. Okay? A bunch of life on it. Chance to heal with lucky hit chance. And as you saw, my chest gives me a lucky hit chance increase while I have a barrier. And it gives me a barrier. Right? Very nice. So on lucky hit, there's a chance to heal a bunch of life. Very cool. But the main effect is, effects that heal me beyond 100% life give me a barrier. So, that's good. Up to a certain percentage of my max life that lasts for 8 seconds. Potions can be used while at full life. Which means, this potion is giving me a buff from both the helmet and the chest. And the helmet gives me a bit more barrier than just... Sorry, not the helmet. The chest and the leg. Okay, I'm getting it from both. And the chest gives me a buff on top of what the legs alone can give me by a couple thousand. By a lot. It's great. Now, the important thing is, these pants here, anytime if I heal and I already have full health, I get a barrier. Okay? That means the goal is to get health from different sources, and there's different ways to do that. Right now I'm using a bunch of skulls on my weapons for life on kill as an experiment, but there's other ways to do it. Okay? Right here, there is this anticipation vampiric power. Sorry, no. Oh. Whoopsie. The Undying vampiric power where casting skills will heal me. There's another one, Hemomancy, where my attacks deal 80% of my max life as physical damage to nearby enemies, which is another reason to have extra life, to be tanky because you do more damage. But it's so effective that it kills everything before I have a chance to even touch them. It's great for a Thorns kind of build where your idea is just to stand there, okay, and just deal damage without doing anything, passive damage. Every so often, tendrils appear from your body that kills everything around you and heals you. Every 4 seconds. Wow. Wow. Amazing. And you heal for 1% of your max life for every enemy damaged that way. Wow. There's 100 enemies, then Shazam. There you go. Every 4 seconds. Crazy stuff. But it kills them too fast. My point is that this would work. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. And right now I'm not, but I will probably do that in just 3 seconds. I keep flipping back and forth to see how things feel, but this is something I use that amplifies my barriers, and it triggers it automatically. But there's other ways to do this, and other things that go in that slot. For example, this damage reduction per 2% life I'm missing is really good that could go in that slot. And so is this other... I only have 5 slots here for the vampiric powers. One is cooldown reduction every time I attack, you know. One increases my attack speed, so I attack faster and move faster. That really is optional. Another one gives me health. So it's really either or. I think the other one's a bit too much, but it's nice. I also get an automatic fortify whenever I kill enemies, and whenever I take damage, I get fortify. Okay. Yes. When I don't use skulls, I use the topaz here for basic attack damage. And when I don't use these pants, I use these other pants that I'll show you that give me fury whenever I become unstoppable and increase my damage. Then I have this other chest that gives me cooldown reduction whenever I deal damage to an elite with bleeding, whatever. Or I do a basic attacks, give me 20% damage reduction chest. A couple different options. I also have this other sword I swap out sometimes. It does nice things. A bunch of different options. And I have this other amulet I swap out that sometimes... Or if I don't care about doing the extra damage, then I swap out this amulet here. You see, critical strikes grant movement speed. It's sort of a luxury. But with this vampiric power that I'm not using, sometimes, there's many things I could use, but normally if I want to really go fast speed, I would use that amulet mixed with this vampiric power, where I have a chance to increase my attack speed by my movement speed. So that's a good combination. But I'm not doing that right now. Okay? So if I'm not using that sword, I use something else, you know. Sometimes I use the Ancient's Oath, which gives me the Steel Grasp ability, where I can grapple enemies towards me. But then I have to swap out one of my abilities, either the Charge or the Leap. Sometimes I like the Charge in synergy with these pants over here, Tibalt's Will. Okay? Which is nice. But I do like that barrier. But it's nice, you see. It provides a reason for me to use Charge. It's one more reason to maintain Charge. Because Charge gets me unstoppable, along with my Berserker Rage. And so it's about getting the cooldown, getting the extra damage built up. But then I lose a barrier. And there really is a analysis where you have to decide but what to cut back. You really have to start cutting back damage to go more defensive as you go deeper in the dungeons. It's really, 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 really important. So these pants might not work out as much as these pants, namely Tibalt's Will versus Temerity. Okay, but I might not need the double barrier effect. I really am trying to see if the double barrier effect is worth it. I think it might be worth it. I have options, but this is definitely part of it. And I don't really need barriers if I have enough potions and enemies are dying fast enough. And if I'm fighting easier content, that's why I would love if they had multiple build loadouts, which they currently don't have. They currently don't have multiple loadouts. Or an armory, which would be very nice. I keep mentioning these things because then I can swap these things out and not have to worry about it. But it's a complicated series of things I have to swap out between two extremes, because these pants would be nice and it would be much more effective. And then, but there does reach a certain point where all of a sudden it doesn't work, you know? Because you really could push hard content being really powerful, because this would make me even more ferocious, doing my attacks more often. And you just gotta kill a lot of stuff, get the potions that they drop, and keep on moving forward, be selective, be very careful, and so forth and so on. But then there reaches a point when there's just too much damage, I think. And there are other methods to get a barrier, but you have to choose what you want to lose. What do you want to lose? In this case, I'm losing 3B Fury and 30% more damage. Okay? And I have other means to get damage, and to really focus on dealing that damage by doing my key attack more often and getting it queued up. And I have more methods to get Fury. Sometimes it's rough, but it's okay. It's okay. I feel like if I could use a variety of my abilities more often, it's better. I like to cycle through all of my abilities and not just a couple. You know, I think it's really cool to use all of your stuff as much as possible. Now, I'm usually saving upheaval for a key moment versus a nice big wad of enemies, or a boss, or a group of elites that are hard to kill. You know, everything else, I'm not doing it with that. So what I have to do is, like I mentioned, spend a bunch of Fury quickly. But I like to save, so I spend a bunch of Fury quickly. You'll see an icon appear that means that the attack is ready. And whenever it's time, I press number 4, and this triangle of fire kills everything in front of me. And it deals a lot of damage. I posted a video on YouTube and so forth showing me one-shot Varshan with it, because it does a lot of damage, 25 million damage, boom. It's because it's going to be a critical overpower. It's critical overpower with extra damage. It's a critical overpower. which is amazing. It's like double, so forth, and just amazing. Just so, now the goal is to get that Fury online as fast as possible, just by attacking things. And I can get it up there pretty quickly. It's not bad. Remember, my Fury generation is increased when the Wrath of Berserker is active. But and when that Enrage is active, I'm getting Fury per second. Sometimes it feels kind of slow, especially if I'm on a team, because I'm not really hitting things as much as I should, because enemies are dying. That's why I don't want things to die too quickly, because I have to hit them to get that Fury. There's ways to get more Fury though, but that becomes equals weakness. I'll show you the different ways to get more Fury. One way is over here in the tech tree, skill tree. First of all, you increase your max Fury. Okay, there's different ways of doing that. Right over here, every time I swap weapons, I gain Fury. There's also it's in the Paragon board as well, where every time you swap weapons, you get Fury. You know? There's a shout that gives me a chunk of Fury. There's the leap that gives me a chunk of Fury if I land on enemies, for example, right here. The leap, you gain Fury if you land on them, you know? That's if I land on them. But I like to find the right balance. I was trying to slow them for a second, but jumping on them is slightly better. Like that would fill up my Fury bar. There's ways to handle it. And of course, hitting enemies really quickly. So that's what I'm trying to do. So I figure the faster I attack, the better, because it gets the cooldowns all cycled up.
Is someone there? Please, I need
You know?
your help.
And I'll show you my Paragon board in just a second.
My dearest wanders these.
See, I don't have much thorns, so in this situation I can't really attack these guys because I have to escort this swim plan. There it is. Every time I get Fury on top of a Furied enemy, so every time I get Berserk on top of a Berserk enemy, I get that Enrage effect, or at least there's a chance where I do more damage. A bunch of these layered effects, and we're good to go. Always moving around, and I'm trying to evade in the direction of the enemy, so that my Berserker, the Wrath of the Berserker effect, picks up as much as possible. Okay, here we go. I got it ready. Here we go. Ready? And I kind of wasn't ready for that, but whatever. I like to make sure that everything's all lined up. It sure is dark here in Diablo. It sure is dark over here, you know what I mean? It's a pretty fast attack speed, and this isn't even Frenzy. There is a Frenzy attack that is extra fast, and it builds faster and faster as you attack. And there's an amulet that increases that attack speed, and then increases all other attack speed based upon that attack speed. Meaning you can build it to higher stacks, and then once you get that attack speed boosted up, it bleeds over to your other abilities. But that involves a non-lunge. I just love this ability to dash over. You see how I'm like dashing through the enemies? That's almost all of my basic attack. Like right now, it's all my basic attack. You know, I can just zip like this. See, that's not me evading. Now this is me evading. See, that was me not attacking, but evading. And right now, that's an evade. See? So if I attack like that and then evade, That's what I want. So I'm attacking, and I'm evading in the direction that I'm attacking. You know? At first, I was wasting my evading sideways and so forth. No, you're supposed to evade through the enemies with this build. So you evade through the enemies. You have to evade through the enemies. Like that. But I'm like constantly spamming the spacebar, by the way. Remember, my attacks reset the cooldown for my evade. Normally evade has a certain cooldown timer. They would have died if that guy wasn't suppressor. You know? Suppressor ability has like a protective dome. Outside shots don't work. See, there's my trample, or my charge, but since it was so wide, it still hit them even though I hit the tree. So I can jump all the way over here, then wind back in. Without leap, I feel like I can't move as much, because my charge isn't always ready. And with the charge and leap, I can really move around. You know? I can really move around. The charge, leap, and lunging strike, and evade. And the need to evade, you know? And the attack speed. It all works out together. And the whirlwind. It all, like, nice and fluid with multiple layers of unstoppable building up. Nope, I have the Wrath of Berserker and the charge. Both give me that unstoppable status. You'll see the chain over my head. Here, I'll show you. There's like a chain, like that unbroken, or that broken chain. It frees me from crowd control. So, for example, if this ice wall were to freeze me right now... Well, it didn't happen. I was trying to get frozen, but... no. It was very nice. You can see right here. Here's one perk, another perk. It's ready. See, I have to keep spending. Now it says 300. Now it's ready, which means my next upheaval will do a ton of damage. But I can't do it right now because I don't have Fury, which means to get it ready, I have to do a bunch of attacks. Okay? And ideally, I would love to do it while I have Wrath of the Berserker and while I have that in Rage and while the enemy is bleeding, vulnerable, and on fire. And crowd controlled, but whatever. Like stunned or slowed. Because all the bleeding enemies here are slowed with my perk. So if their life bar is purple and I'm on fire, that means that it's going to do a lot of damage. I just know it's going to kill them. It sort of has to. It kills bosses. It'll kill anything within that radius. You know? And I can get that lined up pretty quickly, if you see. So let's just analyze and determine how fast can I get the stack of 300 up and running. You see? And how fast can I get that other buff running? It'll just take a moment. See, let's just watch. Just watch. See, 273 very, very quickly. By the time there's another elite group, it's ready to go. Which means right now, actually. See? A nice 1,000,000 damage right there. See, doing like 5,000 damage, 27,000 whatever damage, and then it goes up to 1,000,000 or 5 million, 20 million. Ridiculous. See, 18,000 damage, 30,000 damage, and then 1,000,000 damage. See, that was 451,000 damage. Only because they wasn't vulnerable and I wasn't in enrage mode and I wasn't Wrath of the Berserker. So it only did 451,000 damage as opposed to 15 to 20,000 damage. Or between 5 and 20. Depending. You see? So I'm almost done showing you my build and how it operates. Okay? I'm going to show you my Paragon points now. There's still a lot more to show. But you get the idea of what I'm trying to accomplish. I zigzag through the enemies, try to get my cooldowns down. I'll show you what's up on my Paragon board. Get the Berserker online, get that Enrage online, get him on fire, bleeding, Berserk, all that nonsense. Yeehaw. Build up those stacks of Fury expenditure to get my upheaval up and running with the 300 stacks, along with the Wrath of the Berserker lined up at the same time, and then they all die. And I'm zigzagging through them, moving nice and quickly, on fire, zibbity doobity, yeehaw, with a barrier, and I'm healing the whole time from the enemies. As I hit them, as I kill them, they're healing me. I'm using my potions to heal myself, picking up potions. It works out. And I could one-shot bosses from time to time. So here is my Paragon board. In case you don't know, after level 50, you stop earning skill points traditionally. And then 4 times a level after that, up to level 100, you unlock Paragon points. You get more from the Renown board, but that's a different story. Up to a certain point, like 20 more. Okay? So, you earn 4 Paragon points per level between level 50 and level 100. Okay? Plus, you earn points from this Renown board. You see, here's the map, in case you haven't seen Diablo 4. Big old map. I think new territory down below eventually. New territory over here off the map eventually. You know how it works. But you have these 5 different regions. You have Skosglen, the Dry Steppes, Kazakhstan, Hawazar, and Fractured Peaks. Snowy, swampy, cliffy, deserty, and even more swampy. Different versions of swamp, okay? This is like a wet forest, and this is like a bog, okay? This is a desert, but it's also cliffy, and this is more sand dunes. You see? And this is just the frosted, snowy peaks, and so forth. Alright? Different areas. Now, you get credit for what you do in this game, and it crosses between characters, and it lasts forever. What is true? Or these bonuses do, at least. These lower bonuses. You see where it says +1 skill point, +1 push capacity, +1 skill point, max obols, +4 Paragon points behind my camera. You see, for every region, there's 5 regions, so you get a bunch of extra stuff. So you end up with a bunch of extra potions, 5 extra potions, 10 extra skill points, a bunch of extra obols, for a max of 1,000 obols. Okay? For a max of 1,000 obols through a variety of means, and 20 extra Paragon points. So, it's a bunch of Paragon points per level, and then that bundle, you fill out this board. When you first start off, you have this one board here, okay? And there's nothing populated. And you have to draw a path leading upwards to hit the next exit board to connect a new board to it. At the connection points, you can see other possible boards. Each board has a nice legendary feature. For example, whenever I spend Fury, gain max life at Fortify, or swapping weapons grants Fury, like I mentioned before. You see, that's a legendary node. Swapping weapons grants 4% max Fury. Amazing. Every 12 seconds, my next skill is guaranteed to overpower. All that cool stuff. Damaging enemies with one-handed weapons, increasing my critical strike chance by 1% for 4 seconds. Only happen once per skill cast, or twice per second, while channeling Whirlwind. You know, some interesting ability that is usually in the center of the board somewhere that you have to dig towards after connecting and then rotating the board to your delight. As you can see, I've attached a board to my first board, and there's legendary node. I'm not using it for reasons. You see, I'm using that legendary node. I'm not using that one, and I'm not using that one. You see, you could either dig toward the legendary nodes, or you can dig toward these runes, or you can dig toward maybe the magic things on the side. These are special things, but not as powerful as the big yellow one, you know. Or you can dig towards this socket for a glyph. This is the glyph socket. You put glyphs in there. Once these drop, they don't drop anymore. You don't get more than one, you only get one of them. You get a glyph. Eventually, once you're in World Tier 3, glyphs start dropping. And once you get them, you get them. Eventually, you'll have all of them. They drop in dungeons, they drop off elites, they just drop. You'll get them. They might drop in the Tree of Whispers bag. You got a glyph, good job. And now it's there. You know, it starts off at level 1. Like Marshall. And these things do amazing abilities, okay? It's like a free legendary ability or a unique ability. For example, after casting a shout skill, the active cooldown of every other shout skill is reduced by 1.2 seconds. And that is just important. Okay? For example, I'm not using it, but that's just an example. And then you would do something to level up this glyph to make it more effective, to increase those numbers. For example, I'm using, for every 5 dexterity purchased within range, I deal more damage to bleeding targets. And I have 5% increased critical strike chance against bleeding enemies. And that radius is talking about is this big footprint, you see. As you level up the glyph, it expands the footprint so it covers more of this territory, so you can then empower this node. For example, for every 5 willpower purchased within range, you deal increased bleeding damage, right? And if the additional requirements are met, okay, if the requirements are met, killing a bleeding enemy has a 10% chance to reduce the cooldowns of my non-ultimate cooldowns by 1 second, which is very important. And to meet the requirements, I had to spend 25 willpower within this footprint. But the standard footprint isn't that large, okay? It's much smaller. Here, I'll show you. I'll find some other node that has no levels on it, like this one right here. You see how small the footprint is? And now it says 17 out of 25. Even though the same points over here were spent, the footprint doesn't cover like this willpower right there. You see? That's outside the range. And there isn't enough willpower within the range, so you have to level it up. And this one right here, you see? So now you can see that willpower and that willpower and that willpower. Now they're all within the footprint, and now it's empowered because I've leveled up the glyph. And these numbers over here get better, and so forth and so on. But there's a lot of different glyphs, you see? And you have to dig towards a glyph socket. Okay? And the arrangement of these boards matter. You see? You sort of have to make a decision of what you want to dig toward. Because every point is precious when you're dealing with this wide of a spread. You know, I barely made it over here. I barely made it over there. You barely make it over here. And this is all the points you get. You know? And there's other boards that are possible, and you could rotate these boards. It's amazing. You could rotate the boards. Meaning, you see, I don't like this arrangement. I was trying to go for something else at the time. But I was really trying to go for this node over here, but then I cut it away, so I don't like how this is currently set up. And I want to change the entire thing, but this is the first board connected to the rest, so I cannot delete this board. You can only delete from the end. See? And it costs like 25,000 to delete each node. Whatever. I have a lot of money. I have 333 million, so it costs, you see, 5.6 million to delete everything and then start over again. But then you have to dig through, and because there's so many different options, sometimes I don't go on the same exact path without taking a screenshot. I know what I'm doing, which is why well, let me reverse that. I don't mind the process of rebuilding it because that enhances my ability to know what I'm doing. Meaning, I know enough about what to look for. I know what I'm doing enough to be able to respec and not be clueless every time I do it. I know what to look out for now. I know which glyphs are useful and which ones aren't as useful, but I still haven't experimented with certain glyphs. And I've tried different legendary nodes, but that involves digging towards it, rotating the board over, you know, spending. If you look here, it costs all of this to dig towards that node, you know what I mean? If I wanted to. And it will cost a whole lot to dig towards this node, but if I rotated the board, it would be a much shorter path. You know, there's lots of options here, and there's lots of stuff out here in the boonies. And whenever you're trying to connect boards, you're not just looking at the legendary node here, you're looking at these rare nodes. You see all this really cool stuff. So whenever I'm building a character with a reset board, I'm looking for certain elemental resistances. Among these boards, one of these boards will say cold resistance, one of them will say fire. This one right here says lightning, you see? So based upon my current gear, with no gems applied, I look at my resistances. And because some of my gear might have resistances, I look at my lowest one and I try to dig towards it on the board. So I have to kind of waste some of my path. But then on that board, there's something else good. You see, on the route towards that lightning node, there's going to be, look, there's increased movement speed after killing an elite, or increased attack speed, or whatever. You know, there's good stuff on that board, perhaps, but not good enough for me to use right now. But it's up in the air. But this is sort of how the Paragon board works, and now this is what I have right now, okay? So I dug through here, and while berserking, I deal 10% reduced, or I take 10% reduced damage from elites. This is the ire glyph. And for every 5 strength purchased within range, I deal increased damage while berserking. Alright, then I have this armor right here, some other stuff, you see, more damage while berserking because of that strength node or something, you know, whatever. You know, every strength equals that. There's a big chunk of strength on this node. There's reasons why I chose it. 20% physical strength right here, going up, 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 up. See, I could go down if I had 1, 2, 3, 4. Every point is precious. If I had 4 points, I'd have 10% more life, because 8% and 2%, plus some armor. You see? There's bits here and there, and I'm sure there is some I could move around. And that's why I keep looking at it and make small changes, small adjustments, because I might have some fluff I can kind of pull back based upon what I'm currently doing. So, right over here we have physical damage over time. Quite a bit. Like 20% at least. Whatever. And then right over here we have poison resistance, because we need these things, right? And then I dug towards this glyph. Damage over time. Killing a bleeding enemy has a chance to reduce it. Some flame I showed you. You see, I have some damage over time. Actually, almost too much is what... I almost have too much, to be honest. But in this case, I want damage reduction from bleeding enemies. I don't really want damage over time. I want damage to bleeding enemies. That's what I want. Physical damage over time is nice and all. Damage over time... damage during condition is better. Both is ideal. But whatever. You can see I've already spent quite a bit of my potential on damage over time. So you can't see I'm not doing it. We have this damage while berserking node right here. Very nice. Mainly because this right here. This legendary node says killing a bleeding enemy has a 10% chance to grant berserking for 5 seconds. Very nice. My damage is increased by 25% of my damage while berserking bonus, which means I had to go stack a bunch of damage while berserking, which meant I had to go look across these different boards for different damage over berserking buffs, like this right here, damage while berserking, all this stuff right here. Okay, now my chest gives me a bonus to my barrier based upon the effectiveness of my potion, and on this route, as I go around the corner, there is extra potion effectiveness, so I went ahead and got it, you know. And then we have damage reduction from bleeding enemies and damage to bleeding enemies right here. And this is fire resistance on a little node. See, you could always try to get a shortcut. Is this shorter than that? Uh-oh. 1, 2, 3. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4. Uh-oh, I can probably save one. See, I just saw that there's a shorter path. 1, 2, 3 versus 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? And I saw that there's something over here I could have changed. But anyways, it's about finding this ideal path. And this is sort of where the end game is. It's really, really, really awesome. In fact, I sort of want this node over here. That's pretty important. You know. But there's only so much to go around here. So we have damage to vulnerable enemies, which is really, 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 really important. Damage to vulnerable enemies. Okay? And damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. And this node here is a special node. It's a glyph. It increases the effectiveness of the rare nodes in proximity. So it's doubling the effectiveness of that vulnerable damage situation. And it makes it where if the enemies take thorns damage from me, they it increases all damage up to 8%. And I have just the least amount of thorns damage on it. So it's just, as long as they take any amount of thorns damage, it increases all damage. That's irresistible. So I had to give myself like just a little tiny bit of thorns through my... Right here. See, I have the tiniest bit of thorns. Just 1 point. Okay. And I'm still explaining my build here. Oh, yeah. 1 second. Alright. And you see it's a long, windy road here. You see damage to bleeding enemies. Very nice. All this stuff. More critical strike chance against bleeding enemies. Damage to bleeding enemies. You can see what's going on. Very nice. It works out. That is the blood feeder. More damage to bleeding enemies. Alright. And over here, vulnerable damage. I already showed you that. More vulnerable damage. It stacks up. We're not doing that. So I could dig towards this, you see, but... And it really would be good. I feel like I could respec this whole board and make it slightly better. Every time I look at it, I get new ideas because I see more potential. But anyways, so over here we have cold resistance because I need that. You see, I had to dig towards this node here. We have this damage while berserking. And Undaunted gives me increased damage while fortified. I've been trying to build up this Wrath glyph to at least level 15 because I think it'd be really good. Skills that critically strike generate fury. Like I mentioned, the fury issues, and I have increased critical strike damage. That would increase all of my damage. You only stretch it so thin. Like I said, there's one glyph socket per board, and you have to dig all the way to the board. And there's lots of other juicy things. And you want to stack things, but not too much. There's diminishing returns is the gaming term here. Diminishing returns. Because it's not just about activating some effect. It's about how... Think about... Just to activate this glyph, it requires all this digging. All these points, you know? But you make it worthwhile, so you dig towards this node over here and this node over here, but that requires this connection path, and that's all sort of wasted points. Here, and... These points aren't really doing anything, and neither are these. All these connection paths are all potential, but not really because you have to get to these things. So the goal is to find the shortest path by rotating the boards. Okay? My goal in rotating the board was to activate this cold socket at the very least. And over here, it was that poison thing. And I figured I'll be going up and to the left. I don't like this right here, though. See, this board sort of has a waste because I'm going down here and up there. If this was rotated this way, I would have access to this node and then be digging up in this... I would have it from this whole thing like that. And I would cut away all these points. And I'd be more powerful, but I'll be doing less damage over time. Because, as you see... I would like to go for some other effect a little bit. For example, I would like to... This looks really nice. Every time that I make an enemy vulnerable, my damage is increased by 10% for 5 seconds. Overpowering a vulnerable enemy grants a 10% bonus. So it's just a flat-out 10% damage bonus. But sometimes I feel like I'm killing the enemies enough that it's fine. You don't need to do that much. But then I get weak. You know what I mean? There's like flat... But this board looks pretty good, right? Pretty good across the board, but there's only so much you can do. So much you can do. You know? If you really want to stack into health, there's here and there and here and there and here and there. You know, I try to really fine-tune this system, but there is growth potential. So, for example, I'm going to cut away my life by 2%. Okay? And then I'm going to make that shortcut right here. 1, 2, 3. Alright, but I need to cut back something because we have to have the room to grow for a second. So I'm going to cut away one, two. I'm going to cut away all this potion healing. You guys gained 4 right there. And I'm going to move these right here. And then, see, I just gained 5. See that? It's like a game in itself. I cut away a big chunk of potion healing. It was for my barrier. There's a big chunk of damage to bleeding enemies right there. A big chunk. And there's also this thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's such a precious thing. You gotta cut away from some category of damage to move it over someplace else. So I'm gonna cut back this extra chunk of damage while berserking, because I feel like I have a lot of sources of damage while berserking. And I would like to go for some other factor. I can always come back to it though. Because see how many points I'm saving here. Alright. Now I have 13 points. But see, let's say I wanted to activate another glyph. It costs a lot to dig all the way to another board and then dig to where the glyph... It will cost like 30, 40 points or something just to activate it. And then once you make it to the glyph, you have to then empower the glyph by having a bunch of points around that glyph. You see, it requires a bunch of points. It's not just making it to the point. You have to cut away some entire other sector. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You see? Equidistant flimflammery. Damage to bleeding enemies. I mean, hard to resist that, but I will get rid of these extra flames. But I want at least this. I'll start to get really weak if I start to do those funky things. Okay, fire resistance. Do I need this extra periphery? Nope. Okay, don't need that. Now I have 7. Now, the control impaired duration reduction is normally really important. If you get frozen, it'll free you from that status. Okay, and potion healing. Okay, let's just do this. There's also damage to elites. It's like a hidden damage that won't really show up, but it's damage to bleeding enemies. Some raw damage right there. I'd rather have that. So over here we have a lot of damage while berserking. Control impaired damage over time. Whoopsie. Let me go check my character for a second. And let me check my different categories. Damage with physical, damage with bleeding, damage with burning, poisoning, okay, bludgeoning, thorns while berserking, while fortified. Versus injured elites. Burning, bleeding. Vulnerable damage, overpowered, critical strike chance, damage. Alright, so I would like to maybe swap out one of my glyphs. Oh, I really wish I could just hit the save button and save this as a build and then move to something else just for experimentation's sake, because sometimes I end up down the rabbit hole of a bunch of horrible mistakes. Let's just see here. So what do we have? More damage while fortified? Yes. Sure. Damage while berserking. Where is it? We're looking for ire. 42% more damage while berserking. Because I chose to have this. Because I chose to have it. I could do this though. Dexterity. One. So I need how much? I need 15. So boom, boom, boom. I think I can do it. So if I remove this, need 5 more. I'm gonna remove my strength. Let me put that there, remove that strength, because we don't need it. It's a waste, you see, it's a game. It's a game. Well, actually I do need it because it connects to that piece right there. There we go. Because I want that extra strength. Alright, so this is active now. So now, skills at critical strike generate fury, and I have more critical strike damage. So, that probably increased my overall damage. And I lost more damage while berserking. But I can replace that with... what else? More damage while fortified. Cooldown. But I already have damage while berserking made up in other... I purposely dug towards that, so I think we're kind of balanced there. You know? You want to have different sources of damage, not a bunch of the same thing. So, damage to bleeding. Now, where's... two others... oh, there is a key. Oh my gosh, there is. So now let me go check over here. Again, vulnerable damage 185, and then we have damage to bleeding. Oh, damage with bleeding, damage versus bleeding. Okay. I gotta increase the versus bleeding. Maybe. Show. I will dig toward... but I don't want that damage over time. Bleed. There it is. Damage to bleeding. I already have it. I already have it. Physical damage over time. No. Damage to bleeding. Damage reduction from bleeding. Okay, that's it. Already have those. That damage reduction from bleeding is nice. Alright. Okay. I think my raw physical damage might be lower. So let me go check out what my raw physical damage says. At 85%. And we can shoot that right up there. Yes, we can. Okay, so physical damage. There's a node somewhere I saw with a nice chunk. Well, this whole chunk over here is great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so I'm going to pull back my damage while berserking. $154. Maybe. If I can get those numbers closer to each other. Because I feel like there's a big chunk right here. And a big chunk right here. And let me go over here. Chunk of physical damage. There's more vulnerable damage around that corner. Okay, damage while berserking is now 99.7. That's fine. That's fine. That damage versus elite thing. Right there. I would like those 3, so 3 more. Damage reduction from close enemies. How about damage reduction? And I'll just remove some of it. Oh man. I do not care about the damage over time. Oh man. I feel like this whole thing is all messed up right there. That's willpower. Got cold. This whole situation right here. So if I had to have one over the other, I would choose that one over there. And over here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, so let's cut away 5 from somewhere and pull it back over. And then I'll cut away all this. Good stuff. And then over here. Now I have 11. And I just want these guys right here. If I was going to have one or the other. There's my elite damage. And where is it? Elite, elite, elite. Monsters. Alright, cool. And now we have this extra secret vulnerable damage around the corner. And this node right here. One, two, three, 4. Just need that 4 more. So let me cut back something else. Hold on a second. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, let me cut away this. Okay, which means I can cut away this. Yep. Damage 2 bleeding enemies. Damage 2 bleeding enemies. Damage 2 bleeding enemies. And now I have 4 more. Right over here. So, vulnerable enemies, and every time I make an enemy vulnerable, my damage is increased by a certain amount. Okay, I'm at 13.5 now. Well, that's my build, everybody. I've lowered my potion limb. Looking at those points. If anything, eventually I need to flip this board around. But I think I have a nice balance, perhaps. Damage versus injured. See, I don't like this sword as much. Damage versus close enemies. Whatever. All these different stats, it's crazy. Lucky hit chance. Now, let's see what I have for my other, for a ring slot, because I could probably swap out that ring. So, I have other options here. Vulnerable damage, physical damage, lucky hit chance, life, attack speed. Sounds good to me. My attack power went down. This ring has perfect, it has perfect cooldown reduction. You know, I think I need this. I need it. No. Why must it do this to me? Alright, well, that's it. This amulet. Bunch of garbage. Okay, we're good to go. Ooh. After swapping weapons a bunch of times, you deal more overpower damage. That would stack even more on top of everything else. And that can probably go on... Yeah, I'll keep that. For later. I'm not going to do it right now, though. This was just a breakdown of my build. I hope you enjoyed. Oh, yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah. Let me just break down all this other stuff here. Yeah, I have some options, you know. I have options with my abilities. But this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's just irresistible. You saw I made a few changes as I was explaining. You know, like with my skill tree, I had to put the fury generation right there. And automatic vulnerability there. Over here, automatic vulnerability. We have more damage versus elites right there. A little bit of thorns. Damage, damage, damage. No stunning. You see, it's a pretty precise measure on the point spread. Really little wiggle room here. I have this damage control. I have this control impairment duration reduction. But I'm not going to use it. And I'm going to increase the chance, or the vulnerability chance on my stuff here. And increase critical hit chance against slowed enemies. Right there. So I'll do that. Very nice. 9% chance, and all enemies that I make bleed are slowed. And it's pretty awesome. So all the enemies I hit are going to be slowed. Now I could slow them a bit more, which would actually be pretty effective for the group. So I could lower my overall damage reduction. I already have, sort of. How about right here? I'm reducing my damage reduction while fortified. And I'm maxing out the slow effect this to 60%. There we go. And we have just a tiny drop of damage reduction while fortified, because I have that barrier as well. So that helps. And we're good to go. Yep. Everything's fine. Attack speed's normal. I could increase the attack speed even more if I wanted to, but I think we're okay. Yeah. But I do notice that the enemies aren't as vulnerable as I want them to be. Now, I do have a bunch of max life inside my perk board, so I could do this. There we go. Really increase that rate of vulnerability. It's pretty important. So I have pretty much a flat out 9% critical strike chance now with the enemies slowed, and they're slowed quite a bit. I'll make it 40% instead of 60%. Give myself more life. I'm sure I don't need something. Everything is just so important. You're bleeding. Of course, it's already bleeding. All of my attacks are bleeding because of my technique slot, so I would rather have my whirlwind do a tiny bit more damage. Right now I have it where the enemies bleed. Now, the technique slot right here, over 5 seconds, see, it's the same amount of time as that attack there. So it's 5 seconds of bleeding. Right? My ability there. Good to go. Everything's fine. Upheaval does more damage over time, you know? I mean, as I do other attacks, my upheaval gets stronger. Minimum amount of thorns. Vulnerability on that charge. And the fury with the leap. More damage against injured enemies. And slow right there. Alright, well, that's it. No extra points. I would love to max out that slow, though. Critical strike damage with my two-handed weapons. Yep, well, that's it. That's all I can do. And that's my build, ladies and gentlemen. Any questions? Any questions? Wonderful. Wonderful. And that's what it's all about. And I try to use a few incenses to make it really work out. That really is part of my build, you know. The incenses and all that. I'll put this in here for the time being. I'm not in a town with gems. I have these consumables. You have the Chorus of War gives you plus 40 all stats. I'll show you in just a second once I go down to the Occultist or the Alchemist. Head on down to the Alchemist in one of these major towns. We're heading to a major town. Alright, here is the Alchemist in town. So, Chorus of War, right there. Soothing Spices. Resist all, plus 10 per nearby player. And armor plus 150 per nearby player. Really good. Okay? It caps out by default at 70, but you can increase it through that incense by 1% per nearby player. And through the, you could basically increase your max resist all by 15% up to 85%, but it can't go beyond that. Yeah. So, Chorus of War for all your stats, wonderful. And overpower damage by 5%, even better. Oh my gosh. Right. Soothing Spices for that resist all, and then that leaves a tier 1. So if I'm fighting a poison boss, I would do Storm of the Wilds for lightning, cold, and poison damage resistance. And if you notice, there's 3 world bosses. One is, I don't know their names. One's cold, one is lightning, and one is poison. Duriel. Another one is damage over time, which is slightly different. So Storm of the Wilds is important. Hey, thank you so much there, Chris. Oh yes, I'm just breaking down my build for the people and what I've learned so far, and these other flim-flam. Right now I'm talking about the consumables that are important. So right now I'm focusing on this tier 3 and this tier 2 incense. You can see what they take with the ingredients. I have a lot of everything except for that bottom thing. The biteberry, which happens to be the most common thing from that list. And the easiest thing to get. Which is how I love to play video games. All the other stuff, harder. Okay? You gotta kill demons and they might rarely give you a demon heart. You have to kill humans, they might rarely give you a pale tongue. You kill vampires and they might rarely give you grave dust. And you kill creatures and they might rarely... I tell you what, if you're trying to get it on purpose, they're not going to drop it, okay? Here, I'll show you. Let's just go kill something until they drop one of those listed items. My point is, if that was the bottleneck, fun gameplay, because now you want to kill spiders, you want to kill vampires, you want to kill humans. It gives you a reason to do it, because they drop things. Now, these are creatures. Let's see how long it'll take until they drop crushed beast bones. Okay. Like this guy. I'll tell you what, it's not every creature. It ain't every creature. That's for sure. And these guys would drop demon hearts, and those guys would drop crushed beast. They're not dropping it. Maybe if there's like a mountain of bad guys that you're killing during some event, you'll have the occasional thing dropping. Okay? But everything else, those other items I showed you at the Alchemist to make the Chorus of War, it's an individual plant found within an individual zone. Biteberry. Found within the Fractured Peaks. So it gives me a reason to farm through the Fractured Peaks. Okay? Let's go back down to the Alchemist. And
magic, steel. I've seen all manner of wounds.
So the fiend, so demon heart, pale tongue, grave dust, crushed beast bones, all drop from different creatures, mobs that you kill that fight back. Okay, and then the fiend rose is a special plant that only drops in the Helltide, which is a rotational activity that appears across the map. I think is active right now. You can see this red zone is the Helltide. So within this zone, there's a plant that spawns here and there, everywhere. Okay, and some creatures have Fiend Rose on them. The Helltide Harbingers have them. Okay, so there's like a meteor. You're running around, there's like a meteor falling event. Meteors fall, you dodge the fire, and then out from the ground or from the sky comes a harbinger. You kill the guy. He has a bunch of currency plus the rose. So within the Helltide, you get the Fiend Rose. Alright. So for the Chorus of War, different body part things plus the Fiend Rose, and then the Biteberry, like I mentioned, only comes from the Fractured Peaks. If you mouse over these things, it tells you exactly what I just said. So for example, Demon Heart, found in the bodies of demons. Found in evil humans. Found in zombies. Found in animals. Okay? For the different monster parts. And over here, you have plants. You see? Biteberry. Found in Fractured Peaks. It tells you. Howler Moss, found in Skosglen. Redamine, found in Dry Steppes. Blightshade, found in Hamazar. Lifespan, found in Kazakhstan. Those are the 5 different zones, 5 different plants, plus a universal plant that's found in all zones. Gallovine can appear nearly everywhere. Gallovine, everywhere. Fiend Rose, only the Helltide. 5 different plants for 5 different zones, and then Angel Breath is a special plant and can appear everywhere. But it's a special plant. Golden. And rare. It's not always there. It's there sometimes. I'm not sure of how often it appears out there in the field, but it's really, really rare out there in the field. But if you go into a Nightmare dungeon, the enemies drop them on occasion. So if you want to farm Angel Breath, you go through dungeons. Now back over here with the incense, you look at these incenses. A lot of these incenses require Angel Breath, plus some other stuff. Some of them require Angel Breath and Fiend Rose, plus some other stuff. And some of them require Veiled Crystal, which is like a rare material that you get from breaking down rares and above. You break down a rare item, and you get the Veiled Crystal. So, in this sense, as long as I keep fighting random enemies, I'll always have those body parts. As long as I do the occasional Helltide and farm through, I'll always have Fiend Rose. As long as I do the occasional Nightmare Dungeon, I'll always have Angel Breath. Now, as for those plants, I have to make sure that I'm purposely plucking plants as I perform other tasks within the Fractured Peaks. So as long as I'm looting the occasional thing, it helps. Now in this case, because Biteberry is so important, because this Chorus of War is so important, because it only lasts for 20 minutes before the buff is applied, whatever. That means I'm burning through Biteberry like it's no one's business. And because more than one incense requires that, like Song of the Mountain also requires Biteberry, and this Blessed Guide also requires Biteberry, you know, you end up burning through the thing in stacks of 20. You know, all of a sudden you're out. And if you want some other thing, like, I want this instead, whatever, you might need a bunch of Redamine or Howler Moss. Now here at the Alchemist, you're able to refine resources from one type to another. You see, if I need more Biteberry, I can use Gallovine. If I need more Blightshade, I can use Gallovine. If I need more Howler Moss, I can use Gallovine. Now, I can make Gallovine using any of the other plants, besides Fiend Rose and Angel Flim. The 5 core plants you can convert into Gallovine, and Gallovine back into those 5 core plants. So if you have excess of one, you can convert it to another through that intermediary, which is what you gotta do. So, much of my gameplay consists of doing these activities. Now, like I said, different areas, different plants. Goth Glen has Howler Moss. I need that. I showed you my incenses. I, in particular, only want Force of War for all stats, Soothing Spices for Resist All, and then maybe something else, but only really just 2. I'll leave the tier 1 open, because I don't want to make Song of the Mountain, because it requires more Biteberry. And it's really conditional. Like I mentioned, if I'm doing a poison boss like Duriel, I want Storm of the Wilds for that extra poison resistance. If I'm doing Fire, Cold, or Shadow boss, doesn't exist, whatever, I might need that as a place filler, but it really is just about this one, the poison one. And that one also requires Biteberry, so I'm not going to make it beforehand. I'd rather have a big stack of Chorus of War, because it really is amazing to have all those stats. Okay, now the other options are individual stat bonuses. Now I in particular need strength for my Barbarian, but the Paragon board requires high stats to unlock the long-term benefits. I'll show you. You see, as you dig through the Paragon board, further and further and further, these rare nodes cost more stats to make active. You see, the starter nodes cost 160. See, it says another 10% physical damage if these requirements are met. You need 160. I have 501. And over here, this node requires 260, and this node over here requires 350, and this one requires 440 and 610. 440 willpower and 610 strength. You see, it's a combination of willpower and strength across the board. And sometimes, depending on my point distribution and my gear, I don't have enough of those core stats to, like right here, you see, I don't have enough dexterity. And I'm off by 39. Sometimes I'm low on, my points are so low that I need 65 of willpower. In that case, I would use both the Chorus of War and the Blessed Guide is my point here. The Blessed Guide gives me 25 willpower on top of the 40. Chorus of War equals 65, you know? But if there's other players nearby, I don't need Blessed Guide because with one additional player, instead of 40, it's 80. You see? So I don't need that. But sometimes I make it just in case I'm alone, in case my stats are weird, and whatever. But if I did have all the points in the world, I'll make this armor one. But really, it is just about these two right here. Chorus of War, and then Soothing Spices for the resistances and not stats, you know. So that means it really is just about about farming specific plants. And like I said, I end up, if I'm playing the game normally, I end up with the occasional Demon Heart. Okay? And Pale Tongue, and Grave Dust, and Crushed Beast Bones. Right now, for example, there's a lot of demons out here. This is the Helltide. Demons are falling from the sky. There's demons everywhere. You're going to get a couple Demon Hearts. Okay? If you farm here for an hour, you're going to get a couple Demon Hearts. Because they drop on occasion, and there's nothing but demons. It's crazy. It's just a bunch of extra demons on top of the normal monsters. Okay? And this green zone is the vampire event, which means there's a bunch of extra vampires, and all undead give you grave dust. So you end up getting a bunch of grave dust through common happenstance. And creatures like spiders and wildebeests and bears and even snakes, I think. Any sort of creature, they have a chance to drop crushed beast bones, and they're sort of across the board, all over the map. And so are humans, are different variety. There's cultists, cultists or cannibals or some weird normal human barbarian weird thing out there in a big pack of raiders. There's humans everywhere in every zone. My point is, I don't have to try very hard to get Demon Hearts, Pale Tongues, Grave Dust, and Crushed Beast Bones. I just gotta play the game a lot. And as long as I occasionally do a big Helltide, I get the Fiend Rose. And as long as I do the Nightmare Dungeon, I get the Angel Breath. My point here is that I only really purposely have to focus on farming the standard plants of the individual zones. I have to go out of my way to look for plants. It shapes how I move through the zone. I'm running really fast, looking along the sides of the map and around. Here, I'll show you. If you look at how the map is designed, for example, over here by Nevesk is a hotspot, I think, for, I'll show you right now, Biteberry, and so is Yelesna. I'm trying to figure out where these plants spawn, and how often to get them, that they respawn, and how many can I get per rotation. See, you could be all throughout this region and not find a single plant, and then you'll find one here, one there. There should be one right there, you see? Gallovine. You see, right here? Biteberry. There's the hotspot. Gallovine. And I look around, and I do the activities, and I'm really going through the zone looking for the plants. See? Gallovine. Remember, the excess Gallovine can be converted into Biteberry. It's like the universal plant, And I'm going through, those sellers have a box at the end, and that box can have a plant. See? Gallovine. Around the edges. All around. That sort of thing. But I don't like to come out to a zone just for the heck of it. I do it whenever there's some other event. As you can see, this is the entire Fractured Peaks portion. And in this subsection of the map, there happens to be Tree of Whispers activities. So I like to multitask. I'm doing those activities while I'm farming. In between this Helltide, which is active for another 40 minutes. And whenever I'm done with the Blood Harvest, it lasts for an hour. It doesn't take an hour. And in between these Legion events, like this one's popping up right now in 10 minutes, in between all the other stuff, I try to go through the Fractured Peaks. Or through Kazakhstan. I'll show you. So I need Fractured Peaks for the Biteberry, Goskglen for the Howler Moss, and Kazakhstan for the Life's Bane. The Chorus of War only takes the Biteberry. The Soothing Spices requires the howler moss and lifespan. And that's all I need. I already have stacks of the other stuff and it comes through the happenstance, but I have to purposely, consciously look at the Kyrgyzstan area and go through it on purpose to get more plants, because it's not enough through common happenstance to maintain my consumption. You know? It really is. See, there's a look for events like this desert. I'll show you right now. Like that whole desert area has events or bounties, or the Tree of Whispers activities, Grim Favors as they're called. And I'm pretty sure the reward for the Grim Favors or the bounty board, whatever it's called the Tree of Whispers. You do these activities, you fill up this bar at the bottom, you complete 10 Grim Favors, you go back to the Tree of Whispers right here, and you get a random reward box of different variety, which has a bunch of stuff inside, including potential plants and other endgame resources, and sigils, and legendaries, and boss spawning body parts. And if you're not level 100, a lot of XP, like 1,000,000. So, for example, this right here is nighttime in the Shifting Sands of Chaldeum. There's different activities, like find these shrines and whatnot, and I'll go through, focusing on those tasks. It's all dark, I know, it's sad. Dark, dark, dark. We go through, you know, and do the task. You're looking around the edge of the map. If you're just playing happenstance-like, you're not going to pick up the plants, because you have to purposely sort of go around. See right there, you see? You have to kind of go around these nodes. I was going to show you directly like this. As you can see on the map, you have these little nodes. You see? That's where the plants spawn. Like around these things. Not all the time, some of them. It's not going to spawn so much right here, more so right there. But not every node. It wasn't right there, it was right there. So I like to, and the edges of the map, you know, the edges, and, you know, you might just have a bit, but really, if you're in a zone, you end up with like 20 or 30 or whatever after staying for a while. See, here's Galovine. It has 5. It could have between like 1 and 7 or so. Quite often it's 1. Sometimes it's 7. You know? It works out. It's surprising at times. Galovine. Quite often it's Galovine. I'm just trying to show you the ratio of these plants. See, it's far and few between. I'm running, purposely going around the edge of the map, deliberately looking for Galovine. But of course, I would normally be multitasking as I'm doing it. But I'm not really playing right now. I'm trying to show you my build. See, on the minimap there's red dots. There's a bunch of tasks in this area that give you credit. See, Galovine. Not much lifespan. Now I realize this area down here sort of has a lot of Galovine. Like right outside the base. Here, I'll show you. So not Galovine, but lifespan. Every so often, if I have time to kill, I try to go ahead and get a cluster. If I haven't done it in a while, and I know where there is a cluster, like there's a nice tight cluster, because really it is a random thing that you get as you run around. But if you do it deliberately, you do get a little stack, but then quickly that stack turns into a couple incense, and that couple incense gets eaten up so quickly. You know what I mean? If it lasts by default only 20 minutes, plus this duration, plus, well, not even here. It's just 20 minutes. You got these buffs for the season that increase certain things, including how often or the duration of your elixir, but not so much the incense. So 20 minutes comes and goes rather quickly. A hard dungeon might take more than 20 minutes. Or you could barely do 2 or 3 dungeons before you have to use another. You know? But an elixir lasts for 40 plus minutes, which is enough for plenty of gameplay. But if you're doing hard content and your incense is almost expired, it's not worth doing another dungeon, you know? So you have to pop another one, and you do it again. So see, lifespan right there. See, lifespan, a little cluster. Lifespan, cluster. You have regions that have nothing. It's sort of known. So that's why I said that this is sort of like the secret game, figuring out the plants, because they give you massive bonuses here and there. There's activities everywhere. You get credit for these things.
We demand blood.
You know what I mean? So, yeah. So that's my build, and that's how, like, my Paragon points work, and that's what I'm working towards. I'm still experimenting, still growing, leveling up some of those glyphs with the Nightmare Dungeons, and trying to really maximize those layered benefits and kind of spread them out a bit, you know? You can't have stacked up in one area and then nothing in another area. You really have to cut it back a bit. It's also about what you're doing, but the goal is to find a way to apply as many effective status effects on the enemy and then increase the damage versus those status effects. Bleeding, burning, crowd control, and then every individual crowd control. If you're lucky, like for example, you could have damage to slowed, damage to chilled, damage to frozen, damage to crowd control, all be different damages. Of course, the enemy isn't chilled and frozen, but the chilled leads to frozen. And that is crowd controlled. So an enemy could be chilled and crowd controlled. It's the same thing, and that damage would multiply. Because chilled enemies are crowd controlled enemies. You know? One extra layer. Crowd control, slowed, chilled, you know, stunned. Those are all different status effects. But sort of the same thing. Vulnerable damage, injured, healthy, meaning if they're almost dead, if they're full health, or above 80, below 25%, you know. Close, distant, deal more damage to close enemies, to distant enemies. Lots of different factors, as many as possible, and then find a way to make it work out. You can't just have these effects. You have to apply the effect, right? And then maximize it, and then layer it. Yeah. And it gets really hard. The dungeons get really hard. You have to dodge all attacks, basically. And whatever defense you have is just there for the fringe damage that you're taking. But I don't even think it's possible for anybody to stand there and tank it. To take the damage and not die. Just stand there and have multiple enemies hit you at once in a tier 100 nightmare. I don't think it's possible. I think you have to avoid everything or kill everything. You have to kill things before they ever have a chance to do any of their abilities. Or you have to never get hit by those abilities and then work your way through them. Slow them down, crowd control them, freeze them, knock them back, get behind them, move around quickly, jump, teleport, dash, evade, dodge, weird things, but not just take it. The barrier only absorbs damage. It's not just damage prevention. You can increase damage reduction from here and there, but there does reach a certain amount of damage that is just too much. And I think you could probably survive if you topped off your health to a humongous degree, to the point where if you stood there, you would be almost dead. You know, instead of it killing you, you'd be almost dead. And then the next hit would kill you. You know, so you wouldn't make it. Like what Elon Musk said. Any mistake in a nightmare dungeon, a tier 100 nightmare dungeon, is death. And you only have a good build just to be able to not die just by the air pressure. You know? Just standing in the room, you're dead. There's a random minion that runs next to you, or some bumps your leg. You have to be able to take some damage. Just none of the big hits. You know? The tiny hits are fine. Big hits are bad. And you have to have so much life leech healing and other methods of constant healing on top of having armor and damage mitigation and resistances and maybe barrier fortify, you know, to catch up with the damage you take. So it's about having extra health coming in on top of everything else. You survive. And that's what I'm building towards, you know. Finding that fair balance and digging deeper every so often to a harder dungeon. I can do like mid-70s. Quote unquote comfortably. That is now my new... I can survive that. Confidently. Like anything below 75, sure. Anything above 75, it starts to get really iffy. You know, as you get closer to 80, it gets even iffier. I can do 80. But then it starts to get really scary, where the damage is really horrible, and you really have to start timing things just right, you know. In my combat phase, I have to hit them, you know, move through, slide through them, hit them, bunch them, and then hit them at the right time. And make sure that all the timing is perfect, you know, get my damage built up, and then kill them. After kind of messing with them for a bit. Other classes do the same thing. They'll be messing with them by like freezing them, like getting them frozen, doing a bunch of stuff with them, or applying a bunch of weird effects on them that starts to slow them down, gets them all weird and stuff like that, and then you kill them. It's about making them nice and weak through a variety of means. Like a barbarian has a shout to reduce the, for example, it's a possibility, you know. There's different layers of damage reduction, you know. For example, you can have a shout that gives you extra damage reduction, okay? Which is great. But then you can make all of your shouts have even more damage reduction. And then have just layers and layers and layers of damage reduction as much as possible to the point where you can tolerate getting hit by a couple enemies. And that's the point. Just to be able to be hit by a couple enemies and not die. You know? But I don't think it's possible to become immortal in a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon. Because you can't out-level it. You can't just keep on leveling to level 200. It gets cut off at 100, and I showed you the Paragon board, and it's a very precise measure of getting these things lined up, mixed with many possible different items. And customizable lines, and potential gear. And is it possible for there to be perfect gear rolls? Maybe. I've been looking. I got some pretty good stuff. It feels like it's possible, perfectly possible to get multiple lines of perfect roll. And then you have one or two sloppy things. And the goal is to look for something that has a near perfect roll in certain categories. Like this right here is 77 out of 78 strength. You know? Unit with perfect things. Like right there, 35.3% perfect roll damage on close enemies. That sort of thing. But then you have something else that is not as close. Eventually you get something that is closer to perfection over time. Those percentages do add up. You know, you end up with other options. You know, other side items. And I'm always trying to replace my best version of something, of course. The items I have aren't the best versions of everything. Some of them I've only gotten one time. You know? It seems like, well, I've gotten some of them. Some of them I've only gotten a couple times. Okay? But I'm getting upgrades. And I am slowly replacing, but I've already replaced everything over a couple times, you know? And fine-tuned and went back and forth and replaced and replaced. At one point I was using, you know, that grapple hook sword, or this other sword here that increases my basic attack damage, or based on how much fury I have. But it was draining my fury in the process, and because this is a unique sword, it doesn't have these individual status lines. It doesn't have all these other affix lines like strength and close enemy damage, injured enemy damage, bleeding damage. It's just way better than that sword. For example, damage while berserking, damage to injured enemies, damage to close enemies, and a big chunk of raw strength. Is that better than damage to close enemies, max fury, damage with dual wielded weapons? You know, chance to restore primary resource? Yes. I mean, or no. It all depends, you know? If I'm using this weapon, this one's sort of better for a very specific action because it provides a resource. It does some extra effect that does extra secret damage right there, you see. Skills using this weapon deal more damage based upon the point of fury that you have, right? A bunch of extra little stuff that makes it better that isn't really visible in this raw attack power number. That is now down to 10,000. But for a reason, because I dug towards a couple things I wanted. Like this right here. Each time I make an enemy vulnerable, my damage is increased by 10% for 5 seconds. Overpowering a vulnerable enemy grants 10% increased bonus for 5 seconds. So that's only really visible as I'm going through the process of killing things. And once I get the vulnerable damage and boom, you're dead. Overpower, boom. It starts to really cycle and it's so in the middle of a dungeon, lots of damage. When I'm on that killing spree, killing a bunch of enemies. But not for one enemy. You know what I mean? Or just a couple enemies. It's for a lot of enemies. Turning through, just trouncing through the whole cycle of just hitting a bunch of things, layering damage. That's part of that concept. It's a hidden factor that isn't visible in that attack power there. It's not visible. And neither is like damage to elites, perhaps. A couple things aren't visible at all. It's really only factoring in your critical damage. Well, it's sort of weird how it factors it all in and what it factors in. See, just now I cut away this entire lower loop and I moved it someplace else. But I don't like this board at all. I don't like this whole sequence. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Well then. I can move it over to this quadrant because I really would rather have this control impaired duration and damage over time reduction. Okay, this isn't really helping me out. It does have physical damage there, but this one over here also has... well, I guess I don't really want that, do I? I don't really care about damage over time, do I? The same thing, really. So what the heck? It's the same thing. What am I even talking about? It's the same node. It does the same thing with a different name. I really want that damage to bleeding targets thing is what I care about. You know. Okay, so I'm going to try to go up north. It'll barely make it. So I'm going to cut away a couple things because I have to get points here to move forward. And I have to connect it first. So I'm going to cut away all this right here and then move it over. And then move it back. Okay, so right here, I'm going to connect this path first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 19, 20, and 20. And now it connects, right? And now I can delete this other side. I'm losing physical damage, but I'm gaining damage to bleeding targets. And push this back over. And back over here. And whatever that glyph was. Damage reduction while fortified or something. More damage while fortified with willpower. Willpower. And, right? Or no? Hold on. No, that's probably damage while berserking. Yeah. Yeah, because there's strength and strength. And right there, right there. Right there, right there. That's good enough. And I have 2 more points I can mess with. Then I went this way. Now I have this bleeding to damage to bleeding targets. I could do damage reduction from bleeding targets, or I could do this. Control impaired duration reduction. And damage taken over time reduction. It brought my attack power down to 10,000. It was at 13,000. But it's all lies. My life probably also shot down just now. A little bit. A little bit, you know? And... But now we have that damage to bleeding targets a bit more. So I gained 15% damage to bleeding targets. But I lost... like 20% physical damage. I think. And this thing... Yeah, that's pretty important. It's pretty important. Is that the fastest pat? 1, 2, 3. See that? That's faster. Right? I saved 2 points. Isn't that cool? Damage to bleeding enemies. I saved 2 points. Oh man, it's so cool. When there's a faster route between A and B. Damage to bleeding enemies. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6. Alright, we have more. More I can move over. Like right here. Amazing. And I lost that from right here. Damage to leading targets. Very nice. And now I have 6 more. Physical damage. Damage with 2-handed slashing weapons. I don't know about that one. Don't know about that one. Here's some damage while berserking I can throw in. Yep. Cause I cut it back a bit, you know? I cut it back for a second. And we have the damage reduction from bleeding enemies. I could dig right here. That's probably better. than these individual rare nodes. Right there. And damage while berserking. And I don't need those 3, do I? Nope. Alright, that was a nice spread. Some changes. Yep. And then I'm going to swap out some of those gems for the basic attack, because otherwise I think my basic attack is going to feel vaguely weak.
Ah, that's finished.
I'll put the topaz in for more basic attack power. Yes, and then I was going to have a bit of life on kill. Just a bit, but not that much. I'll put 2 rubies here
I hope you appreciate that.
for overpower damage. Just for a bit. And now we are good to go. Yep. I could re-roll this all stats line, actually, because I don't think I need that. Actually, I do, because of my dexterity's a bit low. That'd be 69 additional, even lower. Okay, well, I think we're fine now. I'll just pull the stuff out, and we'll do some more testing. Or not testing, but, you know. Time to dive on in again into that dungeon thing. So, that is my build. That took a long time to show you everything, but that's what it's all about.
Hands clean. Look, but
That's what it's all about. And you see there's lots of wiggle room potential for growth and everything. But I have these bonuses now. Damage versus bleeding. That's gonna, as long as they're bleeding and vulnerable, I'll be good to go. There it is. 209. And we have this other effect. I can increase my vulnerable damage by 16%. I'll remove this damage reduction and I'll put this right here, 16% more damage. Okay. There we go. And that would be it, everybody. Okay, that's good. Good stuff. And now I will move forward with the game. And we'll do a few more nightmare dungeons here. I'm trying to level up some of those glyphs I showed you and just condition myself to move forward in the game with the grinding thing. Alright, how long was that with that speech I just gave you? 2 hours of flim flam. Amazing. Okay, we'll do more nightmare dungeons and whatnot. Maybe some of that Helltide in a second. Probably the Helltide first. And because we have to, like I mentioned, to get the Fiend Rose and everything. And since the Helltide is currently in the Dry Steppes, I'll be getting the Redemain. I don't need the Redemain all that much. At all. Besides converting it into the Gallovine to then convert back over into the Biteberry. Well, that was that. If you have any questions, stop on by the live stream sometime and ask me questions on Facebook. Not so much YouTube. Definitely not X, maybe. Until they make the chat open for everybody. Okay. Well, I'll be right back. We shall proceed with more demonstrations. The software crashed for a second. Now I have to fix my camera. The software might crash again while I do this. I have to adjust my exposure.